At a family dinner, I was called a freeloader by the brother whose education I paid for, my parents. Silent. 6 months later, they stood at my mansion's gate, begging for help. This isn't just a story of revenge about rising from their rejection and building an empire they never saw coming. At 18, I held a letter that could have changed my life, a full scholarship to a prestigious art school. It was more than just paper. It was validation. Proof that my passion, my countless hours sketching and painting meant something. I saw a future filled with creativity, color, and freedom. But in our house, dreams were optional unless they belonged to Luke. I remember standing in the kitchen, that letter clutched in my hand, while my parents sat at the table. My mother didn't even glance up when she spoke. "We can't afford both of you in college. Your brother's degree takes priority." My father simply nodded, not a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. Just like that, my dream was dismissed. Luke didn't offer to share the cost or suggest another way. He smirked and said, "You're good at art, Ruth. You don't need college for that." His words stung more than he knew. So I tore up that letter. Every rip felt like tearing a part of myself. Instead of dorm rooms and studio classes, I took a job at a local diner. I scrubbed floors, poured coffee, and worked back-to-back shifts. The money I earned, it went straight to Luke's tuition. I paid his way through college while my own ambitions sat in a dusty corner of my room, right next to my unused sketchbooks. My parents never once asked how I was doing. They never noticed the dark circles under my eyes, the aching in my joints, or the quiet sadness that settled in. To them, I was being practical, the responsible one. Luke was the investment, the golden child with a bright future. I was the fallback plan. My mother used to beam when she showed off Luke's report cards. "He's going to make us proud," she'd say, as if I wasn't trying. As if giving up my dream for him wasn't something to be proud of. My father would clap Luke on the back and call him our future CEO. Me? I was just helpful. And Luke, he soaked in all that attention. He'd come home from college, toss his keys on the counter, and talk about business strategies and tech startups like he already owned the world. "You should get a real job," he'd say with a smirk, looking me up and down in my diner uniform. Not once did he thank me. Not once did he ask what I'd given up. I kept telling myself it was worth it, that family comes first, that one day they'd see me. But deep down, a quiet resentment grew. Not because I wanted praise, but because I realized they never expected me to shine. They only expected me to support someone else's light. That's when I knew they hadn't just denied me a dream. They never believed I deserved one in the first place. Working at the diner became my full-time reality. Every morning I tied my apron, tucked away the lingering ache of dreams lost, and showed up. I was dependable. That was my role. While Luke chased his ambitions with my money, I served pancakes and refilled coffee mugs with a smile that rarely reached my eyes. I sent money home every month without fail. Rent, groceries, unexpected bills, whatever they needed. My mother called it family duty, but duty never felt so one-sided. I wasn't just the daughter who stepped up. I was the backup plan, the invisible engine running behind Luke's golden future.
He graduated, of course. Proud smiles all around.
My parents threw him a party with catered food and decorations. I worked a double shift that day to help pay for it. No one seemed to notice I wasn't there. Luke's ego ballooned with every passing year. He strutted through life with the confidence only blind favoritism could give. Every time he visited, he made sure to comment on my clothes, my job, or the fact that I still lived like a broke college kid. He said it with a laugh, like it was a joke. It never was. My parents let it slide. Worse, they encouraged it. "He's just teasing," my mother would say, brushing off his comments like crumbs from her blouse. My father stayed buried in his newspaper, always conveniently deaf when I needed support. There were moments I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd acknowledge me. Like when I helped cover their HVAC repair or sent money for Mary's unexpected medical bill. But instead of gratitude, I got silence, or worse, backhanded compliments. "You're always so helpful, Ruth," my mother would say, as if I were the family maid. The most crushing part, they never asked what I wanted. Never once did they say, "How are you holding up?" My existence was transactional. My worth, measured by what I gave, not who I was. Luke, meanwhile, lived out his startup dreams, posting about his big ideas on social media, name-dropping tech founders and calling himself a visionary. He acted like every success was self-made, ignoring the fact that his entire foundation was built on my sacrifice. He never credited me, he never even looked back. Over time, I stopped trying to be seen. It hurt less that way. I smiled through family dinners, swallowed my frustration, and played the role they wrote for me. But behind that quiet obedience, something else was growing, a slow-burning anger, heavy with years of being overlooked. Their praise for Luke echoed louder than any insult, because it came wrapped in silence toward me. Every ignored contribution, every dismissive glance added another brick to the wall between us. I wasn't resentful because they loved him more. I was resentful because they never bothered to love me enough, and that realization changed everything. The spark of change, 500 words, the night everything shifted wasn't some dramatic showdown. It was quiet, almost too quiet. I just come home from a double shift, smelling like fryer oil and bad coffee, only to find Luke lounging on the couch in our parents' living room. His feet were up, his shirt crisp, and his voice loud, bragging about a new business idea that was definitely going to disrupt the market. Curious. I asked a question, something small about user growth or funding. He scoffed. "You wouldn't get it," he said, waving me off like I was an annoying customer asking for ketchup. My mother chuckled like it was cute. My father didn't even flinch. I stood there, exhausted, apron still tied, and realized I wasn't even a person to them anymore. I was a fixture. A background character in Luke's spotlight. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The words played over and over in my mind. You wouldn't get it. But I did get it. I understood sacrifice. I understood hustle. I understood what it meant to carry people who would never carry you back. And somewhere in that silence, something hardened in me, not bitterness, resolve. I made a decision. I was going to stop living for their approval. No more waiting to be noticed. No more hoping they'd wake up one day and see me. If they couldn't value me, I'd show the world my value, and I'd do it my way. The next morning, I started small. I pulled out my sketchpad not to draw, but to plan. Not for art, but for freedom. I listed skills I needed: coding, business strategy, tech literacy. I made a spreadsheet of free online classes, budgeted for a better laptop, and started spending late nights watching tutorials instead of reality shows. My break times at the diner became study sessions. I downloaded podcasts on startups, marketing, and UX design. I wasn't dreaming anymore, I was building. And I wasn't just thinking about myself. I remembered the kids who came into the diner, dragging their backpacks, talking about how they couldn't afford tutors or extra help. I remembered being one of them. That S when the idea came, an online learning platform for students who'd been left behind. It would start with just a few subjects: math, reading, maybe coding. Simple, accessible, and free. A place where kids who were told you wouldn't get it could say, "Watch me, I kept this dream to myself." No one in my family would have cared anyway. But every shift, every tired walk home, every silent dinner with my parents fueled it. I stopped sending as much money. Just enough to keep them quiet. The rest went into my future. This wasn't rebellion. It was rebirth. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living to serve someone else's dream. I was chasing my own end. I wasn't going to stop until I caught it. My empire started on a folding table in a cramped studio apartment that smelled like cheap noodles and ambition. I didn't have a co-founder or a tech background, just a stubborn heart and a secondhand laptop with keys that stuck. Every night after work, I'd dive into my online courses, piecing together what I didn't know with what I couldn't afford to outsource. The first version of the app? A disaster? It crashed, glitched, and froze every time a student tried to complete a lesson. But instead of giving up, I stayed up until dawn fixing lines of code I barely understood. Every bug became a lesson. Every failure, a footstep forward. I wasn't brilliant, I was relentless. I spent weekends visiting libraries and community centers, pitching my barely functioning prototype to anyone who would listen. Most people politely nodded and disappeared. But one director at a small after-school program in East Naples took a chance. "If you can get it working," she said, "you can test it with our students." That first session changed everything. 5 kids sat at beat-up desktops, logging into my platform for the first time. The math module was clunky, but it worked. One kid, tall, quiet, eyes full of doubt, sent me a message afterward. I finally passed my algebra quiz. Thank you. I stared at that message for what felt like hours. It wasn't just a win, it was a confirmation. My idea had weight. My work had worth. Someone out there not named Luke, not part of my family, was benefiting from something I built. I doubled down. I tweaked the UI, added progress tracking, and opened up a basic reading comprehension section. I kept everything free. Accessibility wasn't a feature, it was the mission. Kids like me shouldn't need money to dream big. Sleep became rare. My meals were mostly whatever was cheap and fast. My apartment looked like a war zone, sticky notes on every wall, code scrawled on whiteboards, discarded snack wrappers on the floor. But for the first time in my life, I felt alive. As the app improved, I started cold emailing nonprofits, schools, and education blogs. Most ignored me, but a few replied. The platform slowly started gaining traction, not millions of users, not yet, but enough to prove I wasn't delusional. I still worked at the diner during the day. My parents thought I was wasting time. Luke laughed when he heard I was building an education app. You? What do you know about tech? He'd said. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because every login, every student message, every tiny win whispered what I already believed. This could be something big. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted to prove to myself, not to them, that I was capable of more than they ever gave me credit for. This was my rise. And I was just getting started. 6 months into my journey, I hit what felt like a brick wall. The platform worked, yes. Students were using it. I had testimonials, early data, and a clear vision, but no funding. And without money, I couldn't scale. I needed servers, better design, staff. More than anything, I needed someone to believe in me financially, not just emotionally. I applied to every pitch competition and startup incubator I could find. I gave dozens of online presentations, many of them from my kitchen table with a thrifted blazer over my diner uniform. And each time I got the same response. Love the mission, but it's not a viable business model. Translation? Poor kids don't pay, so what's the ROI? I almost gave up almost. Then came the email. A venture capital firm in Miami was interested in hearing more. They liked my mission. They loved my data, and they were intrigued by my grit. The meeting was in person. I had 3 days to prepare. I didn't have money for a new outfit, so I borrowed a blazer from a friend and took the cheapest bus ticket I could find. I walked into that glass tower, clutching my beat-up laptop, surrounded by people in designer suits who looked like they belonged. But when I started talking about underserved students, educational gaps, and how a single free platform could level the playing field, the room went quiet. I showed them usage stats, testimonials, even a video of a student explaining how the app helped him pass a standardized test. When I finished, one of the partners leaned back and said, "We don't usually fund education startups this early. But you've built something people actually use, and you clearly won't quit." He extended his hand. "Let's build this together." I walked out of that building with $1 million in seed funding. I cried the entire bus ride home. With that money, I hired a small team: designers, coders, educators, each one passionate about the mission. We cleaned up the UI, added video lessons, quizzes, and a chatbot for real-time help. We onboarded 3 school districts, then 5. By year's end, we had 50,000 active users and contracts lined up across the state. Then Forbes called. At first, I thought it was spam, but it was real. They were naming me to their 30 under 30 in education list. I nearly dropped my phone. The photo shoot was surreal. Me, standing under bright lights in a borrowed blazer, trying not to blink too much. The article headline: Ruth Coleman is reimagining learning for underserved youth. I sat alone in my apartment when it published, scrolling through the article, rereading my name in bold. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't send the link to Luke, because, for the first time, their validation didn't matter. The world had noticed, not because I begged for it, but because I earned it. Every late night, every ignored email, every moment of being overlooked had led here. And I was just getting started. It started with a text from my mother. "Dinner this weekend, we want to reconnect." Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part, the old part that still hope typed back. Sure, maybe they'd changed. Maybe just once they'd treat me like more than a background character in Luke's success story. I wore jeans and a t-shirt. Not because I didn't have better, but because I didn't need to prove anything anymore. When I walked into my parents' house, everything was exactly as I remembered, overly polished, perfectly staged, emotionally hollow. My mother greeted me with a tight smile. My father gave me his usual nod. Luke was already there, sitting at the head of the table like a king returned from battle. The table was set with my mother's best dishes. Family members I barely saw anymore filled the seats. There was forced laughter, stilted conversation, and that unspoken tension that always buzzed beneath our family dinners. I kept quiet, observing, waiting, hoping that maybe, just maybe, this was real. Then Luke leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine glass like some Wall Street villain, and said, "Still dressing like you're broke, huh?" The table went silent. A few cousins looked down at their plates. My mother shifted, but said nothing. My father didn't even blink. Luke smirked. "What do you even do all day, Ruth? Live off mom and dad's scraps." He laughed like it was the best joke of the night. "You're a freeloader, shameless," my heart pounded. Not from hurt, but from anger. Red-hot, white-knuckled anger. I looked around. No one defended me. Not my parents. Not an aunt or uncle. Not even one of the cousins who had once played tag with me in this very yard. Their silence was louder than Luke's insults. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I smiled. I slowly pushed back my chair, the screech sharp in the tense silence. "Enjoy your dinner," I said, my voice steady, calm, final. I walked out, their whispers trailing behind me. In my car, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Luke's words, freeloader, shameless, echoed like gunshots. But the deeper pain came from the silence. My parents' refusal to speak up. Their approval of the narrative that I was nothing, that I'd never be more than their family's backup plan. That night, I didn't cry. I made a list. A list of every payment I'd made, every bill I'd covered, every dollar I'd poured into Luke's future. Then I called my accountant. I froze all payments to my family, every last one. That dinner wasn't a failure. It was the spark. They thought I was the same quiet girl who gave up her dream for them. They were wrong. That night, Ruth Coleman stopped being their silent supporter and became the woman who would show them exactly what a freeloader can build. The next morning, I followed through. I called my accountant and gave one clear instruction: cut off every financial tie. No more quiet deposits into my parents' account. No more emergency bailouts for Luke's surprise expenses. I had been their invisible safety net for years, unseen, unthanked, and unappreciated. That ended now. Later that day, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "Can you help cover the electric bill this month? Just until your father gets paid." I stared at the text, jaw tight. Then I deleted it without responding. 3 days later, Luke called. I ignored it, assuming it was more entitlement. But when I finally checked my notifications, I realized he hadn't called to apologize. He had gone nuclear. Luke had posted a thread on Twitter. The first tweet read, "Ruth Coleman, my so-called sister, is a selfish parasite who's destroying our family." He didn't stop there. He painted himself as the betrayed brother, claiming I hoarded my wealth, turned my back on the family, and refused to help when they needed it most. He even hinted that I'd built my fortune off family sacrifices. His followers, mostly tech brothers and startup wannabes, ate it up. The post racked up thousands of retweets. The replies were brutal. "Ungrateful brat. How dare she forget her roots? Family comes first. Always." Strangers tagged me. Some found my company's profile and began spamming the comments with hate. My inbox filled with messages from people who knew nothing about my story but felt entitled to judge it. But the sting wasn't from the internet noise. It was Luke, my own brother, the one I had literally funded turning the world against me. He knew the truth. He knew exactly how much I'd given, how much I'd sacrificed. And still he chose to lie, publicly, viciously. I didn't clap back. I didn't tweet a rebuttal. That wasn't my game. Instead, I picked up the phone and called the one person who'd been in my corner since day one, Aaron Blake, lawyer, best friend. Sharp as hell. I need your help, I said. I want to bury this. Erin didn't hesitate. Give me everything, she said. Every receipt, every transfer, every text. Let's build the truth and make it undeniable. For the next 2 days, I dug through years of files, email chains, Venmo screenshots, wire transfers. I found the $7,000 loan I gave my parents for a kitchen remodel they never finished. The $2,000 Mary begged for when her car broke down. The $50,000 I anonymously invested into Luke's startup because I believed in him, even when he didn't believe in me. The total was staggering. Over $150,000 of my hard-earned money, all gifted or loaned with no strings attached. And now I was the villain. Erin reviewed the documents during a late-night Zoom call. Her eyes narrowed with every new file I uploaded. This, she said, is ironclad. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Luke had tried to destroy me with lies. I would end him with facts. 6 months passed. I hadn't spoken to any of them since the dinner. Not a call, not a text. I'd gone silent and they noticed. I'd heard whispers through mutual contacts. Luke's startup had crashed hard. Burned through funding, failed to meet targets, and now investors were pulling out. My parents were struggling too. My quiet support had masked how dependent they'd become on it. Then one morning, my villa's gate buzzer rang. I checked the security camera. There they were. My parents stood on one side, nervous, uncomfortable in clothes that looked too formal for a visit. And behind them, arms crossed, face set in fake confidence, was Luke. I could have ignored them. Instead, I pressed the button. The gate opened. They stepped into my sleek, modern living room, eyes darting around like tourists in a country they didn't belong in. My success was visible in every detail from the marble floors to the abstract paintings on the walls. The life they said I could never have, I'd built it. Mary clutched her purse tightly, eyes flicking from me to the furniture. George looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Luke? Still smug, still pretending. We need to talk, Mary said softly. I didn't say a word. I let the silence drag. Luke's company, she hesitated. It's gone under. We thought maybe you could help. George cleared his throat. Just a rough patch. You've got the means, Ruth. A little help, and he can get back on his feet. I leaned back, slow and deliberate. Then reached for my laptop, opened it, and turned the screen toward them. Erin's dossier was open. Every loan, every transfer, every record. All of it. $5,000 for your car loan, George, I said calmly, clicking to the receipt. $3,000 for Mary's medical bills. $10,000 for your HVAC system, Luke. $60,000 for your college tuition. Paid in full. No questions asked, their faces drained of color. That's over $200,000, I said, closing the laptop with a soft click. And not a single penny repaid. Mary's eyes welled up. George opened his mouth, then closed it. Luke snapped. You didn't have to give us that money, he barked. You did it to play the hero. No one asked for your charity. I raised an eyebrow. No? Because this email, I opened another tab. Looks a lot like you begging me to cover your final semester's tuition. Ring a bell? He went quiet. I stood, walked to the window, and gestured around the room. This is what a freeloader built. Then I turned to face them, eyes cold. You called me shameless, a burden, worthless. Now you're here with your hands out. Luke tried again. You're rich. What's a little help? I walked to the door and opened it. You've taken enough. Pay back what you owe, then we'll talk. Until then, don't come back. Mary sobbed quietly. George couldn't meet my eyes. Luke glared but didn't move. Eventually they shuffled out. The gate shut behind them with a final satisfying clang. And I stood there, finally free. After they left, I didn't look back. I didn't replay the moment, didn't wonder if I was too harsh. I knew the truth. They didn't come because they loved me. They came because they needed something, again, and I wasn't going to be their crutch anymore. I didn't block their numbers, but I didn't answer them either. I was done playing the role of the invisible provider. I'd spent years giving to people who only took. Now I was giving where it mattered. Naples became my base, but not my boundary. I partnered with schools across the state, expanding the platform. We offered free online learning, mentorship programs, and coding workshops in underserved communities. Kids who'd once been overlooked were now logging in daily, building skills, asking questions, dreaming out loud. That was my fuel. I hosted a workshop one Saturday at a local community center. The room buzzed with energy teenagers, curious, skeptical, hopeful. I stood in front of them, jeans and a simple tee, no titles or prestige, just me. "My name is Ruth," I said. And people once told me I'd never become anything. I shared pieces of my story, how I gave everything for others, how I was called worthless, how I was written off. I didn't name my family. I didn't need to. The pain was universal. And so was the fight to rise above it. "You don't need anyone's permission to succeed," I told them. "You just need belief in yourself, in your vision, and in the work." One girl, maybe 16, asked, "What if your family doesn't believe in you?" I smiled. Then prove them wrong, not with words, with results. Build something they can't ignore. The workshop ended with applause, but it wasn't for me. It was for themselves, for seeing possibility where others had only ever shown them limits. That was my legacy. Not magazine features, not million-dollar funding rounds. But kids learning to code, teens acing tests, young minds daring to dream. My family's approval was never going to define me, but these lives? These sparks I helped ignite, they would. And I'd choose that kind of legacy every single time. I spent years trying to earn love that came with conditions, praise that never arrived. In the end, I stopped waiting. I built something for the kids like me, dismissed, underestimated, forgotten. My revenge wasn't rage, it was success, purpose, and peace. My family saw me as a freeloader. Now, they see the mansion I built on my own. If you've ever been silenced or sidelined, know this. Your power isn't improving them wrong, it's improving yourself right. You don't need their approval to matter, just your own belief. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of resilience turned into revenge.